Hey guys, welcome to the Paradigm Shifting Podcast. I'm your host, Binky Bell, and before we get into today's episode, I'm going to do a little bit of shameless self-promotion. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you can be notified when new episodes go up. If you happen to be listening to the podcast on iTunes, if you could leave me a review on that platform, it would help me tremendously. You know, all of these things, liking, subscribing, leaving reviews, what they do is they push my podcast out to other women, and we can help spread this message to other women who might be looking for it, other women who might be needing a little bit of help, a little bit of encouragement, and a little bit of support. So thank you guys. Let's get into the episode. Hey guys, today's episode is going to be super short. I want to talk about the concept of emotional labor. Emotional labor, if you don't know, the term was coined first to describe the labor that you don't get paid for, the labor of managing your emotions in career fields that are often very stressful. A common example is flight attendants who have to remain, happy and relaxed whenever there might be something kind of scary or stressful going on. Now that the term has since been hijacked by mostly women to describe the labor of managing a home, the labor of being a wife and a mother. And now we have this whole culture of women who say that managing a home, being a wife, being a mother, entails all of this emotional labor because we're the ones that plan the birthday parties, buy our mother-in-law's birthday gifts, send the greeting cards, the Christmas cards. We're doing all of these things that wouldn't get done if we weren't the one to do them, right? So I want to spend some time talking about this because I find it really problematic. And I used to be a victim of this mindset. So we're going to talk about that a little bit, and maybe we can see that this is an area that we can shift our mindset on just a little bit. So the concept of emotional labor comes up often in women's groups, so moms groups, spouses support pages, and it's often because it comes in a shareable article that some woman wrote to say, look at all of these things, all this stuff that I do, all these things that I do every day that my husband, he doesn't do. And if I didn't do them, he wouldn't know to. Things, like I said, sending Christmas cards, making sure that you have all the right party decorations for the birthday parties. Some people even include things like managing my husband's calendar. One woman mentioned knowing the school's handbook for her children, things like that. And whenever these articles get shared around, it gets all the hens clucking. It gets the women in a frenzy, and they say, oh, I do all of this stuff and my husband doesn't even notice it. Now, my first problem with the concept of emotional labor as it's being defined now is that it's turned into a problem that's exclusive to women. Like, that's how we view it, that it's a problem inherent with being a wife and a mother. And I disagree with that fundamentally, because our husbands, our partners, have a whole list of things that they worry about, that they're concerned with, that they're in charge of, that we don't even think of. Your husband might be the sole provider, and he might be the one in charge of the budget and paying the bills. That's a huge stress. That's something that he does that you might not have to think about. Things like saving for retirement, all of the car maintenance, the lawn maintenance, everything that has to do with, pesticides, home maintenance, replacing certain big items in the home. These are all things typically that men are in charge of, that men have to worry about, that we never consider. So first issue, it's not a problem exclusive to women. It's not a problem inherent to motherhood, okay? My second big issue with the concept of emotional labor as it's being defined now is that it's really, if you think about it, it's a way for you to punish your spouse for not caring about the same things that you do. It's a way to punish your spouse for not having the same anxieties as you. Because whenever we start saying that there's a huge emotional labor, a huge emotional toll for managing these elaborate birthday parties or sending Christmas cards, those are things that you're concerned about. And the world isn't going to end if your cousin in Kansas doesn't get a Christmas card this year. So the fact that your husband doesn't give a shit about that doesn't make him a bad person. It just means you care about different things. And that's okay. We forget that our partners don't have to be so concerned with it. And if we're really heavily burdened by emotional labor, we're also, in a way, punishing our partners for our low emotional threshold. So, like, just because we can't handle all the stuff that we put on our plates doesn't mean that it's our partner's fault. Like I said, the examples that these women give of, like, memorizing the school's handbook, that's an actual example that a woman gave. You don't need to do that. It's online. You can look it up. You can reference it. It feels like we're grasping at straws, and these women say, I have to manage my husband's calendar. No, you don't. And in fact, you shouldn't. Let it go. We have all of these things that we can really, truly let go of, and it won't hurt our lives. In fact, it'll probably improve it. It's just we care so much about things that maybe we shouldn't, and then we want to punish our spouse for it. We want to pick fights about it. Now, that's not to say that you can never be overwhelmed. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be overwhelmed by the duties and responsibilities that come with being a wife and a mother, because it is very challenging whenever you're trying to find your footing, find your routine. Some people have shittier husbands, plain and simple. Some people have better husbands. Like everybody's situation is a little bit different, and I understand that. I think, however, that if we're looking at this through the filter of emotional labor, it's not a conducive place to heal from. It's not a good problem-solving starting point. Because, like I said, we're making our partners responsible for the things that we worry about. So emotional labor, whenever these articles get passed around, a lot of the items that are listed are house maintenance. And it's not emotional labor. That is just labor. That's labor that comes with the responsibility of being an adult living in your own home. Now, whenever these conversations happen, the conversation usually goes like this, where women say, I don't want to have to ask him to do the dishes. Let's use the dishes as an example, because this is something that always comes up. We say, the sink is full of dishes, the kitchen's a mess, my husband doesn't even notice it. So the emotional labor is then on me. I'm the one that has to care about keeping the kitchen counters clear. I'm the one that has to care about doing the dishes, because if I didn't, he wouldn't do them at all. I say again, that's not emotional labor. It's only emotional if you get emotional about it. Fundamentally, that's just a labor issue. However, that doesn't mean that it can't be incredibly frustrating whenever you see your partner walk past a sink full of dishes 30 times a day, right? Like, I get that. But here's where the conversation gets tricky, because I have people in my personal life who've had this situation, and I say, well, you need to just ask him to do the dishes. If you're sitting down feeding a baby and he walks past the dishes 5 times and it's bugging you, you can ask him to do the dishes, and then people will say, I don't want to have to ask him to do it. He should just know to do it. And this is where it becomes emotional labor, because now you're burdened with having to remember to ask him to do something that you believe he should just know how to do. To which I say, if you're going to be mad that you have to ask him to do the dishes, if you're going to be mad that you have to get up and do the dishes yourself because he won't do them, if you're going to be mad that you have to ask him to do the dishes and then he gets an attitude about having to do the dishes, every scenario results in you being pissed off. So if you're going to be pissed off, just choose the one that involves getting the dishes done and you don't have to do them. So you are responsible for your emotional management. And that is emotional labor sometimes, to manage your emotions, especially whenever you're flying in the face of hormones and maybe mental health issues. But this is not an emotional labor issue for most couples. This is an issue of communication. And this is an issue of understanding who you married. And guys, I'm going to tell you, I say it all the time, guys are crusty. Most guys are crusty as fuck. They don't care about the dishes in the sink, okay? Most of them. Of course, there's always, people on the outsides of the spectrum. But if your husband has shown repeatedly that he's blind, he has a blind spot to dishes or socks on the floor, that's who he is. And if he's showing you that consistently, why are you surprised by the behavior? You know what I mean? So this is where I have just a huge problem with the concept of emotional labor, because so many of the examples that they list are not emotional labor. They're just labor issues that come with being parents and adults. They're only emotional because you're injecting your emotions into it, when it can be very plain and simple most of the time. Now, I did this. I saw these articles, I was in these Facebook groups, and I bought into it so heavily, and I made my husband responsible. I made him, I blamed him for not being as neurotic as me. I blamed him for not being as emotional and crazy about the condition of the toilets. I blamed him for not being as crazy as me, essentially, because he's fine, he's happy, he's good. It's me who's having the issue, because I have different standards. And I wasn't communicating to my husband. I wasn't saying, I wasn't explaining to him that clutter makes me mentally unstable, that clutter makes it very difficult for me to function. He didn't know that. And it was up to me to really have that awkward conversation where I take responsibility for my emotions, and I explain to him the ways in which I will function best. Because my husband wants to help me. He wants me to be happy. And your husband probably wants you to be happy too. If he doesn't, if he's invested in making you miserable, then what the fuck are you doing married to him, right? So this is a really short episode. I really wanted to just kind of get the conversation going because it comes up all the time. I'm going to be talking about it probably this week more on my Instagram. And we're going to talk about more examples of emotional labor that people give and just start picking them apart. Like I said, I think this is something that we can look at and start questioning. We don't have to digest it as it is. In fact, I think it's necessary to think about these things and have little debates with yourself about them, because it's too easy, especially in women's groups. Women's groups are toxic as fuck, guys. It's so easy to see these things and make your partner your enemy. Your partner is your partner for a reason, and you need to be working together. We can't keep consuming this content that makes our husband and our children the enemy. And once you start to think about the fact that a lot of these articles are slanted that way, that we're the victim, they're the oppressor, we're always being, victimized by motherhood and by our husbands. When you look at things through that filter, it's easy to believe it, and it's easy to internalize that. But I think this is an area where we can really easily question that narrative, and we can start seeking out content that's more helpful. That's more helpful, because these are problems, the responsibility of housework, the division of labor. These are common problems, but I think that we can look to better resources to solve these problems. We can look to resources that focus on communication, problem solving, mutual respect, things like that. And I think we also have to remember the fact that our roles are never going to be completely equal. And I say it all the time. If you're keeping score in your marriage, you've already lost. The second you start keeping score, you're losing. And the concept of emotional labor is nothing more than keeping score. Look at what I do. You're not worrying about this. Look at what I worry about. You're not worrying about the same things. So that's all. Come over to my Instagram. Let me know what you think. I know I really don't want to tell people that they shouldn't be upset about these things, but at the same time, we have to be very careful about the content that we're digesting, because it's so easy to get swept up in it. Okay? All right, thanks guys.